What I'm going to try and show you here is how we're going to produce the infantry, the foot bases for the lawns game. Now, this is a finished article. Before I get down to the nitty gritty of how we put all this together, I just want to point out a few things about the base. The idea was that in some small way we could represent what an infantry formation of the mid to later 17th century actually looked like. Because too often we just see 28mm units, 15mm units, it might be 25 or 30 figures just in a line, usually with all of them doing something a bit different, look a bit spectacular, and it doesn't really tell you much about the formations of the day and what they did and how they did them. Now, the idea of having a pike and block in the centre and some muskets on the side, pretty well universal, people know that happened. But what is perhaps not realised is that the shot on either side, which you can see here, were not one monolithic clump of men with muskets. They were broken down to smaller divisions, subdivisions. I mean, I'll call these companies, it could be called squadrons. There were different terms, different terminology. The 17th century was notorious for its imprecision in language sometimes. But you can see here that there is a gap, an interval between all of these formations, and that's quite important because it's part of the fire drill for these units. At the front of each of the musket divisions you'll see a sergeant, and their job was quite simple. It was to look after the firings that all of these little divisions produced. They would stand there, the first rank would present and give fire, put a deadly hail of lead into their opponents, and then turn sharply to the right and file down the outside of these bodies. Now, this sort of firing by rank, replaced the idea of firing by introduction, which again a lot of people are familiar with, whereby these files here would be at a more open order, and having given fire, each individual musketeer would file down between his fellows. And that was quite a cumbersome and, in many cases, dangerous way of doing things. So firing by rank, whereby you would file down the outside of the company, came into fashion. Much more sensible way of doing it. You'll see that in the centre, the pikes are massed, and also, again, a practice you don't often see on a war games table, the colours are very safely and sensibly placed in the second rank. They're there for protection, but they're still there as the centre of the formation, the heart of the formation, the rallying point. Other little points to notice: the Kati who's in charge, would it be the major or the colonel or the lieutenant colonel, stands in front of the pike division. That's the place of honour. So he's looking after, the men who are good and true in carrying a pike. Well, these are mere dirty mechanicals on either side. Having said that, it's the dirty mechanicals who really won the war. These are just glory boys in the centre. Now, the final point I'd like to notice here is the drummers, who are placed at the corner of each pike division. There were different ways of doing this, but this is the one I've chosen to depict. The drums are the means by which this guy here transmits orders to all of this body. He can shout, but there's 500-600 guys here. Only the sort of like 20 or 30 guys either side of him would actually hear what you're saying. But what he would do is give an order to the drum major, who would be stood to his right. And the drum major would take up a beat, a call. And the calls were preset. All the soldiers here knew what each call meant, or they were all different from each other, and they would then follow suit. Even if the men didn't know what they did, the officers, the NCOs, would understand what to do when the call changed. Now, whether that would be to advance, whether it would be to retreat, it was all controlled by the noise that these drummers were making. Now, the reason why I talk to the drum major is the drum major would change the beat, and these guys here, the other drummers, would pick that up, and that noise would then travel to either side of the formation. Right, that's a very quick introduction to what is quite a complex subject, but that's what we're trying to achieve. So Our job is to find out how to turn this lot here into that wonderful base that I showed you beforehand. So that's basically just a whole lot of pikemen, musketeers and command strips. And it's with the command strips, these little chaps here, a couple of pikemen, a couple of ensigns, a drummer and an officer that I want to start. Because the first thing we're going to do is to give the unit some colours, some flags. And I just want these little ensigns here. So it's a good chance for me to introduce the first thing about handling 6mm strips, and that's tools. And I cannot recommend a pair of these highly enough. The side cutters you can get them at most hardware stores. We sell them on Baccus, but wherever, just get a pair. Because I've had emails over the years, people have been using knives and scissors to do this, when all you need to do is that, and as you can see, you can remove single figures from these strips very, very simply, very, very easily. Now we want to give, I'm sorry about the focus on this, guys, I'm still getting used to this system. We want to give these guys the flags. Flags I'm going to use are basically standard ones from our range. These are the 30 Years' War Spanish tercio flags. I love Spanish flags, they're really, really pretty. We're going to produce 4 ensigns for these. There's going to be 4 colours for each unit. And here's some which have been prepared earlier. You're going to hear quite a lot of that. They look quite pretty. And these are done first because they will be added to the unit as we assemble it. Because assembling the unit is quite important. There's nearly 200 figures on one of these bases. They measure 20mm by 10mm, and that's quite a big base and quite a lot of figures. So we try and put a structure onto them. The structure is done out beforehand, so that I've got some guidelines to work to. And you can see it here. That big central portion is where we're going to put the pikemen. 2 small divisions either side is where we're going to put the musketeers, and then all the other ancillary is going to be put around them. I just use PVA glue, smear it on and put them on. Now what you end up with once you've done that is this, and this is a base just glued onto the MDF. You can see, if you look carefully, where my little pencil marks have been, my little guidelines. But we've got all the elements there. We've got the musketeers, we've got the pikemen, officers, drummers, standard bearers, all those around there. Now, you need those snips if you're going to follow this pattern, because all the Baccus infantry come on strips of 4 when you buy them. And here you can see we have got 5 musketeers and 10 pikemen in terms of the ranks. So you have to snip and stitch them all into place. It's not a big job, but you need the right tool to do it. And the other thing you'll see here is those 4 ensigns are very, very safely put in the 2nd rank, which is where they should be. This idea of having them, one big flag stood out front, that's basically just a target, and that's asking to have the heart and soul of the regiment lying on the floor in a bloody rag because the guys weren't being looked after, and they need to be there. So that's our starting point. We've got the figures glued down. Let's try and make them look pretty. Now the procedure I'm going to take you through is one which we use in our Baccus basing system. It's a very, very simple process. We use tools, we use materials which are designed for use in 6mm figures. You can use your own, you can use different stuff, but we're going to stick with this. And the reason why I'm using it is because I think it's the best way of you handling 6mm figures. You may, of course, have your own opinion. So what we do with this base is we cover it in PVA glue, and then we put sand all over it. And again, the sand we use is a very, very fine grade sand, just using the stuff you normally use for bigger figures, or the stuff out of a sand pit. It's too coarse grained for 6mm figures. It overwhelms them and it makes them look like walking through lava fields. This is the effect you should be looking for, and you can see it's uniform, it is very, very small grained, and it looks right with the figures. What we haven't done is put filler and all sorts of stuff to try and hide the bases and the strips and things like that. That is an extra step you don't need. Well, certainly you don't need it with 6mm figures. And I think there's so much time wasted and expense wasted in doing that. Just put sand straight down to the base. Don't bother trying to step up, fill the things on, because this process here will cover the bases for you. If you don't believe me, we'll just see how it goes. Now, the next stage, or the first stage in the whole process, you can see I've started here, is to put a brown foundation wash on. This is the stuff. It's basically what it says. It's just a foundation wash. It's like a very, very intense brown ink. And it's a very quick process. I'm not going to show you it all, but it is literally just stroking it on like that. The capillary action means that you don't actually have to go in between all the bases like that. The sand takes it and puts it through for you. So you can use quite a big brush like this with no real danger of getting it all over the figures unless you're very, very ham-fisted. Very quick, very simple, and it dries very quickly too. Now I'm not going to do the whole base because we've got quite a lot to go through. I don't want to keep you up all day. But that's the first stage. So let's assume that I've done that very, very quickly, and I've come out the other side with this. Now you can see, oops, this has got brown. Forget these little bits here, I'll come to those in a minute. You can see this nice brown colour here. That's the foundation wash. What we're going to do now is we're going to add a little bit of depth, a little bit of texture to the base, and we're going to be using these, which is a group of 3 paints. We've got a dark, a mid, and a top coat, which we're going to dry brush on to the base. Now, dry brushing, if you've never done it before, is one of those simple things which can be tricky to do, but it's actually a pretty straightforward process. There's nothing to be scared of. It's a case of getting the paint onto a brush and then just taking some of the wet off with a bit of tissue, and it leaves the paint dry on the brush. Dry brush, the clues in the name. And it's a case, just drag it along the top. You can see how quick that is. And all we're trying to do, fairly imprecisely, is to just catch the top of the grains of sand. Very, very quick process. And already you can see the texture coming up while I'm doing other big wide areas. It's really, really a simple process. You're going to have to do that. Go down all the way down here, easy enough done. And you're going to have to do that 3 times, which sounds like it's a real pain. You know, you shouldn't need to do it just one bit, might do it, or 3 sounds very long-winded. It's worth doing because the 3 layers of paint, the 3 distinctive shades, all combine to give a real depth and texture to the base, which you can see there with a completed one. You can see the difference, and that's quite a nice thing to do because in the next stage we're going to be adding static grass. And here's a little bit of the base we've done earlier. You can see where the base is showing through, and having that texture on it really makes a big difference. It's hard to show on the camera, but when you see these things in real life you'll see exactly what I mean. Now the stage we're going to come to now is adding this stuff. It's adding the flock, and this is quite controversial subject. We use a nylon flock. It's basically this stuff. This is again from our proprietary Baccus basing system because it's a very, very short strand flock. It's designed for use with 6mm figures. You can use the stuff you buy from a model shop or from your Games Workshop, but it's usually designed for bigger, larger figures, so that you put this with your wee chaps and they're wading through grass which is 6-7 foot high. This stuff is perfectly sized for 6mm figures. But having said that, I know people who use this stuff for 10 and 15. It's very, very good for other scales as well. But it's applying the flock that's the interesting thing. A lot of people be put off this stuff because what happens is they'll quite happily put PVA glue in a base and then they'll sprinkle this stuff on it like that, and it'll look really good because the base will be covered in green, and then let it dry, they take it away, and bit by bit that green begins to disappear. It gets bald. And the reason why is you've put the glue on, so you put it on your base, and your first layer of grass you sprinkle on, and it does that, and it sticks because the bottom of it's in the glue. But the second layer, because you're sprinkling it on, goes like that, but there's no glue to hold it on, and then the layer on top of that goes there, and again there's no layer to glue it onto. So most of your flock isn't actually held on with anything. You can try and varnish it down, stuff like that, but it never looks right. So after a couple of weeks worth of use, you've just got grass all over the inside of your carrying case or your display case and a very bald looking base. So to get round that, what we're going to do is to use a static grass applicator, which is a very fancy term for something which basically means we're going to put the grass on so it goes down vertically into the glue, and when it lands the strands embed themselves in the glue vertically, and so you don't waste it, it doesn't get lost, and it doesn't come out after you've used it. It's let me show rather than tell. So what we're going to do is use just PVA glue like that. Put a splodge on if you can get anything out of the pot, and then you want a bit of water, because don't use it neat, you want it runny. If you use it neat it tends to be too thick, so we're going to have that nice and runny, and all we're going to do is splodge it on very roughly. We don't have to be exact, you don't have to have coverage, because it's actually quite nice not to have complete coverage, because then you have some of this wonderful browny textured soil underneath just there to come through and to cover up any gaps. So for somebody as ham-fisted as me, and for someone who is as imprecise as I am, this is actually a godsend, and it is also very, very quick. I don't know if anybody's timing this, but I wouldn't imagine what I'm going to be doing here is going to take more than a couple of minutes. And there we go. Right, so we put some PVA glue, and I'm only going to do a third of that base. The trick is, how do you get the grass on vertically? And that's where we use this sort of device, the plastic bellows, the Baccus puff, we sell them, and it's really is a simple device. Deceptively so, I get people asking me, can it possibly work? Is this a con? But it does exactly what I say it's going to do. All you have to do is load up the actual body of the device with some of your flock, put the nozzle back on, give it a shake, and then just watch this. And that's as much as I want to do there. Upside down and tap. Now if you're doing this and you just laid it on, about 3/4 of the flock you've just put on that base would now be sitting in there. But if you take a look now, it's there and it isn't going anywhere. If you feel it, it's actually standing vertically, like grass should do, out of the ground. And that's not going anywhere. That will stay on. That's durable. And as you can see, devilishly quick to do. And that's basically how we're going to produce units that look like that, units which look like this when it's complete. And we're going to do it quickly, we're going to do it easily. Now that's how we put together the foot units. I'm hoping if I've got time that I'm going to be able to produce a similar one in how we've done the horse units, because while the techniques are the same, the way we put the base together, the organisation, I think it might be of interest to people. Now these are for our Baccus participation game of Lawns. And we hope to take that round UK shows over the course of the next 12 months and let people play. It's a participation game, and you'll get to play the French or the Spanish. The games are very, very simple. They should last maybe 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, and should be great fun. There will be approximately 4,000 figures on a 6 foot by 4 foot table, divided between horse and foot. The Spanish have got more foot than the French. The French have got more horse. But both armies are over just under 6 foot, nearly 2 metres from end to end, and that's in 2 or 3 rows of battalia or brigade bases, as you can see here. So it will be quite a spectacular looking game, as well as being quite fun to play. Now there is a chance, if you want, for you to take part in these games, because we are a very, very small company and we do not have the manpower to actually stage these games at every show we go to. So if you know that you're going to be at a show where Baccus normally has a trade stand and you fancy volunteering to run a game for us, we'd be very, very interested in hearing from you. And you would be part of the Baccus team for the day. You'd get a natty t-shirt, and of course we will do your deal on any Baccus products you want to purchase on the day as well. So you won't go away completely empty-handed, but you'll be part of what I think is actually a brilliant project. So if you do want to have a go with us, please do get in touch. You'll see our contact details at the end of this video. If you have any questions, any comments, any queries, please use the comment section. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll do my best to be civil when I'm answering them. And I would hope to see some of you at a show sometime. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.